Well, not a whole lot going on in the sports world right now, but it is draft week for the NFL, and the Raiders will be up on the clock before we know it Thursday night. And we're going to be joined here by legendary broadcaster and the voice over at VSIN, Mr. Brent Musburger. How you doing, sir?
I'm fine, Adam. How are you? How you getting along? I hope you're staying well and the family. Everybody, our thoughts go out to everybody except the health, especially the healthcare workers, if you know what I mean. They're the frontline troops right now. We just hope that everybody stays healthy. But as a diversion, Adam, I've always thought that the draft provides something for all of us stay-at-home football fans. We always look forward to it, and I know you do too.
Yeah, especially this year with not a whole lot else going on. So let's jump right into it. First of all, we want to get into the Raiders. Of course, there is no question Joe Burrow is being picked at the top of the draft, right? We're settled on that. We know that for sure.
Yeah, I can't see anything happening to change that for a couple of reasons, Adam. 2 seasons ago, the Raiders actually played in Cincinnati. There were more empty seats than there were fans in the stands. And here you've got a home state hero, Joe Burrow. His dad was an assistant coach up at Ohio, up in Athens, grew up in the state, transferred out of Ohio State, put together one of the greatest collegiate seasons any of us have ever seen at quarterback, leading LSU to a national championship. He's accurate. He probably doesn't have elite arm strength, but accuracy is critical, as you know so well in the NFL. I cannot see Cincinnati even listening to a whole bushel of offers. I think it's an obvious choice. I think the folks in Cincinnati, the Bengal fans, those who buy tickets and those who may buy tickets, actually look forward to him going there. I think it's probably one of the easiest first round draft choices that we've seen in a long, long time. Personally, I would be completely shocked if the Bengals go elsewhere.
If the Raiders do stay at 12 and 19, there's a lot of options. But let's talk first. Any chance that you see that there's somebody on the board that's worth kind of moving up for in the Raiders' minds that they might trade up from these picks?
Yeah, there is a reason, Adam, that the Raiders have to be a little careful picking at number 12. And that's because I just wrote down before you dial me up, there's 8 teams that could be interested in wide receivers. Now, I know this is a deep class, all right, but there seem to be 3 elite ones according to the experts. But I want you to listen to this list: Raiders, Broncos, Packers, Colts. Now, the Colts don't have a first-round draft choice. They gave it up for Buckner to San Francisco. Vikings, who have 2. The Jets, who picked directly ahead of the Raiders. Eagles and the 49ers, who pick right behind the Raiders. So the Raiders have to be a little bit careful and protect that spot. They've got to have good intel on what teams intend to do. With the 49ers, Jacksonville could trade out of that number 9 spot. They could easily say, we'll get a lower first-round draft choice and we'll pick up another in the second round. So, yes, they do. I believe the Raiders have to be careful because there are 2 areas that I see of great need. One we're talking about, wide receiver. Obviously, the Antonio Brown situation imploded on them last year before the season got going. And Tyrell Williams is really not an elite number 1. Terrific number 2 if he can stay healthy. As you know, he battled all those problems with his feet last year. Hunter Renfrow was a great revelation, but he's a slot receiver, and he'll be targeted right there. You need somebody like, Ruggs at Alabama. He's the fastest in the 40 timed at the combine. Someone who can take the top off for Derek Carr or Marcus Mariota at quarterback. So, yeah, I don't rule out the Raiders making a move to protect that quarterback situation, especially if they think the Jets may head for a wide receiver rather than an offensive lineman. So good intel is what you have leading up to Thursday night.
So you mentioned the Jaguars as well. They just released Marquise Lee, one of their top receivers, so they could be in the mix. Also,
good point.
Raiders have all kinds of competition there for those wide receivers. You mentioned Henry Ruggs. Let's just say all 3 of the quote-unquote elite guys at the top, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, fall to the Raiders. Who's your guy there?
Adam, I'm not going to lean out on that. I'm going to
Okay.
say that Mike Mayock and John Gruden know more about them than I do. I've watched them in games. Okay, I know more about Jerry Jeudy than the others. I used to live in South Florida, and
Okay.
Jeudy was a high school phenom. Okay, there were talks about how he ran routes. He would break defensive backs' ankles down, and that's the expression they like to use. So I know more about Jeudy. But in watching the Alabama games, and I'm a big SEC fan, I got to tell you, Ruggs to me is a little bit like Tyreek Hill of the Chiefs. In other words, he can flat take the top off a defense. Okay, that's what Tyreek features. Okay, and you could use Ruggs as, let's say, a punt returner, which the Chiefs do with Tyreek Hill when they need somebody to bust a return. They'll put Tyreek Hill down there. So speed is something I don't think you can overlook. However, there's a lot of experts out there who say that Lamb's better than either of them. I honestly don't know the answer to the question. I'm going to go with how the scouts and Mike and John grade them. They're smarter at that than I am.
Three very, very good players there with all their own unique characteristics. Jerry Jeudy, one of the best route runners we've ever seen. CeeDee Lamb, very, very productive after the catch. And then, as you mentioned, Henry Ruggs, just that explosive athleticism, unbelievable speed that you just can't teach out there. So can't really go wrong with any of those. The Raiders do have other needs, though, and you mentioned that there is another glaring one at corner. That could be an area that they also look to address in the first round.
Yeah, I was saying when you take a look at the Raiders draft, they're not loaded with picks. They don't have now we've talked about they got 2 in the first. That's great. They have no second round pick. They do have 3 in the third. They have a 4th and a 5th. So they don't have any picks in the 2nd, the 6th, and the 7th round. So initially when I looked at it, I said, yeah, they could trade that 19th pick, and pick up more picks, because let us not forget the Raiders at the bottom of last year's draft. They were probably the most productive team in the NFL. It was unbelievable what Mike and John and the scouts did at the bottom of the draft. Obviously, they had the 3 first-round draft choices, and you can look at it. Well, sure, Jacobs was a star, okay, with great running back pickup, but Abram, the safety, only played 1 game, and frankly, I think they were expecting more out of Furl. He was good against the run, but he wasn't much of a pass rusher. We'll see how he develops. But at the bottom of the draft, Max Crosby and the rest of those guys, they were a revelation. As a matter of fact, as I recall, Adam, I think every one of their draft choices made the initial roster except one. I think there's only one player that got turned loose and he was picked up by somebody. But the failure to come to an agreement with Eli Apple opened up, and I'm not saying Apple's an all-pro. I want everybody to understand that, okay? He was useful. The former number 1 draft choice, I believe it was the Giants, wound up with New Orleans. And I thought the Raiders could plug him in as a starter, but they didn't reach an agreement with him. So then I thought, well, there's got to be somebody out there who's available as a free agent has been signed. I went this morning and took a look at the list. There isn't really anybody that you would want to plug in as a starter. You're better going into the draft. There's a handful of really good corners out there. Okay, obviously the youngster from Ohio State figures to go in the top 5. Detroit's very high on him. And then you've got Henderson from Florida, Terrell from Clemson. Either of those players, if they're available, I would think that the Raiders would move on. So instead of trading out of 19, unless all the elite corners are gone, I think the Raiders are going to have to make use of it, because they honestly are. You could honestly make the argument that they're weaker in that secondary right now than they are a wide receiver. I know that sounds crazy, but let's remember that they're very good at tight end, especially if Foster Moreau comes back, because Darren Waller was elite as a receiving tight end. But that secondary has got to be addressed, and so that's why I think they will hold on to that 2nd first-round draft choice. There is one thing I feel deeply about this draft, Adam, and I'm going to address the quarterbacks. We're going to have a shortened training camp, one way or the other. They always bring the rookies in ahead of everybody else. We're going to have one that's very, very condensed, okay? We may not have a full preseason. We don't know. It's a great unknown. I think now the Raiders were so much better at picking up Marcus Mariota as a backup because he's a veteran. The learning curve for any rookie quarterback is going to be so extreme. Let's just take the Chargers, who are in the AFC West. Everybody's talking about they're going to take either Herbert from Oregon or Tua from Alabama if he's there. Tyrod Taylor is further advanced than either of them, and he knows the Chargers system. Okay, he can go in and run it. There are some elite offensive tackle prospects out there, elite receivers we have talked about. I think a franchise like the Chargers and even the Dolphins, okay, I'm going to make the Bengals an exception. They've got other issues. But I have to tell you, I would really hesitate on pulling the plug on a quarterback in this draft because of the condensed time that you have got. If you go back in the list, and I was just kind of curious, okay, about coaches. When you go back and think about some of these quarterbacks that are out, like Jameis Winston, he's on the street. Lovie Smith was head coach at Tampa, okay? He's out of work. Marcus Mariota was actually drafted when Mike Mularkey was head coach at Tennessee. How about Mitchell Trubisky? When the Bears jump up at John Fox. Sam Darnold, Todd Bowles was at the Jets. And the list goes on and on and on. You take such a risk. I know that all of us focus in on quarterbacks because that's the most important position. You and I both know that. But I got to tell you, you are really high risk when you take a quarterback in the first round, especially this year when you're going to have less time. And in terms of Tua Tagovailoa coming out of Alabama, that laundry list of injuries would concern me so much that if I had a top 10 pick, I'd have to pass. I know what Nick Saban says, but Nick Saban should say that about his former players. And yes, Saban did pass on Drew Brees when he was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, and how'd that work out? Not so well, but it worked out really good for Alabama. Now, so I hate to be anti-quarterback, but in this particular draft, it seems to me with the wide receivers who are out there, the offensive tackles, some of the edge rushers that you've talked about, availability, defensive backs, I honestly would have to look elsewhere. And I know that for a while, everybody was trying to push the Raiders toward unloading Derek Carr. I never thought it was a good idea. And now I think so more than ever. Okay. Derek knows John's system. Has he made mistakes? Yeah. Obviously, he has. You don't throw the ball away on fourth down. We all know that, okay? But he's got Mariota to push him from behind, and we know that John likes Nathan Peterman, okay? You're going to give him a chance in whatever preseason we have going forward. So I guess that's my way of saying beware of quarterbacks in the first round. I know fans and bettors. You talked about VSiN and all the props around town. How many quarterbacks will there be in the first round? With 4, I guess. 4.5. That's the betting number. But I must say, if I was a general manager, especially if I had a team like the Chargers going to that brand new stadium and the fact that they've got to sell tickets too, I'm plugging a veteran in, even if it means after the draft signing Cam Newton or Jameis Winston. I think you're ahead of the curve if you pick up NFL experience, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about it. Well, great stuff, and especially that insight on the shortened training camp and what it can mean for quarterbacks. Before we get you out of here, I want to pick your brain on your experience a little bit. You've been around the sports world a while, sir. You have been around. You've seen a lot of things. This draft, being virtual, not being around anybody, in the way that we're going to conduct it, and just the way sports is right now, have you experienced anything like this in your career?
No. Let's go back to the tragedy of 9/11. We had a city that was attacked and 3,000 some people unfortunately lost their lives that day. But basically the sports world collapsed for a week or so, and then it was able to come back. This is something that we have ever experienced anything like this worldwide. I did note today that the Korean Baseball League is going to go ahead with its 144-game regular season. Now, no fans in the stands. The umpires are all going to wear face masks. But then they put a clause in there that I think is really smart. Never thought about it. No spitting. Now think about that, okay? The virus travels through the air. And I know some fans who have always been turned off, by the way, by the amount of spitting with or without a virus. But they're going to do that. And they're going to play the playoffs in November in Korea, all in one stadium, the entire play. So it's that sort of, and obviously if there is an explosion of contagion, then they'll cancel the season or postpone it even further. But it's that kind of imagination that I think the American sports leagues are going to have to use going forward. The National Football League, the calendar, of course, was not working against them immediately, so they had more time to look down the road. But I think Americans are so hopeful that there will be a football season and even the resumption of a baseball season. I think they're hopeful. But no, to go back to your question, Adam, I never expected to see anything like this. It's just uncharted territory, and everything being shut down. People can watch old games, and I guess the Michael Jordan documentary had a huge audience for ESPN the other night because everybody is eager for an escape, and that's what sports provides. It's not the most important thing in the world, obviously, to those people whose livelihoods are dependent on it. It is very, very important, and there are a lot of lives, even other than the players. You think about how many players are going to be under contract in May. I mean, we got thousands of athletes out there that are just hopeful to be able to make a living out of this. I have never seen anything that even comes close to resembling this, and I hope I never see anything like it again.
There you go. Well, great words from you, sir, and I always appreciate the time. I tell you to stay busy, but you've got all those books right there behind you to read, so hopefully you got
my
that
mom
going
put me into books. And by the way, you can pass on to your listeners and your viewers if they like thrillers. I found a new one, 3 Hours in Paris. If you like The Day of the Jackal, you will like 3 Hours in Paris. Trust me.
There you go. Sage words from Mr. Musburger. We appreciate it, sir. And
you got it, Adam. Take care, my man.
We'll see you soon back here, and have a great one.
Okay. Thanks a lot.